Hello, everyone. Welcome to Friends of the Force. I'm your host, Sarah.
And I'm your host, Brad.
And on today's episode, we are delighted to bring you a really fun interview with Alyssa Wong, one half of the writing duo behind ESCAPE from Valo, which is the latest High Republic middle grade book, which was co-authored with Daniel José Older.
Yeah, I was really excited about this one because we haven't had the chance to talk with Alyssa before. Their first time on the show, so it was a huge honor. And this book in particular, we loved. You know, we always love our youngling stories in the High Republic, especially ones that include Ram Jamaram. This one brought us a lot of new characters to talk about with Alyssa, including Drigget, Kildo, Gavi, Tep Tep, all the above. Such wonderful, heartwarming, wholesome characters. And Alyssa now being part of the High Republic is so cool because their Dr. Afrocomic, which also just won the GLAAD Media Award for Outstanding Comic Book this year, is incredible. That run of Afrocomics was just amazing. And to have Alyssa contributing their voice to this initiative that's near and dear to our hearts is wonderful. So a really great conversation ahead.
Yes, if you know me, you know I love my middle grade big feelings stories, and we certainly talk about it and all of these lovely characters in the interview. So we hope that you enjoy. So without further ado, our interview with Alyssa Wong. So we are getting the chance to talk to you now that the book has been out for a little while. What is it like now that ESCAPE from Valo has been on the shelves? The Twitter High Republic community, at least where I hang out, has been talking about the book. What's it like? What's been like to have this book out?
It's amazing. It's surreal. It's my first book. I think
Congratulations!
thank you. I think it's Daniel's 20th book, which is wild.
Wow.
But you know, it's such a special book to me. And I kind of feel like when other people start reading your stuff is when it feels real to you. At least that's how it works for me. So seeing all of the amazing reactions, seeing people, you know, send us really nice messages like, this is the first time I've seen myself in fiction, which is huge. This book is the book I would have wanted to have when I was a kid. Or this book has like given me confidence or changed my life. Like all these amazing things. It's not something that I expected to happen. Because I'll be honest, I was like, oh, we'll write a fun High Republic book. And it ended up being like my heart. Like it's so much to me. And seeing that it has touched other people in the same way is really, really cool. And it's real.
Yes, it's like real. It's like literally in my hands. It's so cool when something that comes from as somebody who's been a bookseller, somebody who just loves like creative work. It's always amazing to me from like the ideation point to like the actual it's done, it's a thing point. So, you know, that's no small feat in any creative work.
Yeah, I can hold it. Like I can actually hold it, and
Physical media.
I love
in my
physical
hands.
media. I think as a writer, like I always had that childhood dream of being like, I want to go to Barnes and Noble and look on the shelves and like see a book that I wrote. And now I can, and it's weird. It's wild. It's so cool.
Yeah, I love that for you. I like as somebody who's not a creative person, like necessarily, I'm more on the like the let's support the creative people. It delights me when people say that, because I think as like a fan and as a reader, I really feel that on our end as well. And we kind of start off this podcast talking about how you say how this book is your heart is you. We always like to learn a little bit more about guests who come on the podcast. You're a Friends of the Force first timer. Lots of F's in that one. Thanks, Brad, for that alliteration. So what is your personal history with Star Wars that leads you to, you know, writing all these amazing stories that you already have within the world of Star Wars and now sitting here today?
Oh, thank you. So I grew up watching the original trilogy. I it was always like one of those, like, you're a little kid and you're like, oh, this would be really cool. Um, I was a little bit younger than Anakin when episode 1 came out. And I thought being a pod racer was like the coolest thing ever. Like I wanted to be a pod racer. And then I got older and I met a lot of fans who told me that Star Wars wasn't for me. Um, and so I just kind of stopped talking about it. Uh, and I figured, well, maybe they're right. Like, I don't know. I love it, but maybe that's not enough. And now I'm like, oh, that was really rude. uh, Fandom gatekeeping is never good. Um, and when The Force Awakens came out, I saw it and I thought, wait, this could be my Star Wars. Like for the first time, like I think maybe I could see myself in Star Wars. And that was the thing that reignited my love for it. Um, when I was asked to write the Dr. Aphra comics, I was still really inexperienced as a comic writer. And I don't think I'd solo written a single like issue of like a mini series or anything. And I was like, okay, I guess it's time to learn. And really working on Aphra is what, like, if The Force Awakens was a spark, um, Aphra was like the fire. And now I love Star Wars, and I feel like it's really special because I feel like I've gotten that joy back again, and that's priceless.
What a journey that you've had, because like when you were announced at London to be the next Luminous author, like there were so many people in that room who were so loud. I almost felt as loud as the Acolyte stuff. I was like, oh my God, Alyssa Wong, this is amazing. And, Rogue Element, great. Escape from Valo, great. So I just want to say thank you for, sharing your Star Wars journey with us and being a part of this. Like, what did it mean to you to, I guess, come out on that stage and have that reveal? And then just getting to collaborate with this group of authors and with Daniel on this book through that process. Like, what has this experience in particular meant to you building off of Aphra?
I mean, it's been life changing. When the High Republic was announced, I was like, this sounds really fun, and it's it's weird in some ways. It feels like kind of a unique experience because I got to experience it as a fan first, and then being invited to be the 10th member of like Team Luminous. I was like, it's amazing I get to play in this world that I have always thought was really neat. And also, when we talk about diversity and representation, the High Republic, I think, is where we really get to see that pop off. The High Republic is a space for everybody, which is special. But coming out on that stage was wild. I was really nervous because I thought I was going to trip getting up on the stage. But coming out and then hearing people start screaming, I wasn't expecting it, and it was really, really sweet. I mean, it was life-changing, getting to see how much love people have for the stuff that we work on. It's amazing.
I think it's also pretty incredible whenever it comes to the books, because it's like one thing to like go to the movie theaters and sit among, 100 other Star Wars fans and see a movie kind of all together. But like reading is a very personal, individual experience. And so whenever I see the Star Wars reading community come together offline, it's always a bit wild to me to see the enthusiasm and the joy and the passion, because like I have that. I know Brad has that. We talk about these things all the time, but like we're just two people. And so it's always so cool, I think, to see the way that the stories have resonated with people outside like my individual fan circle, my friends. So yeah, the book circle is amazing. I'm in love with all of them, really.
I think that's like, for me, that's like one of the most special things about the High Republic fandom, and also like the Afro. All of these people who have read something, like you said, it's a very individual, personal experience, have come together and they've built real friendships. I mean, around this media, but also beyond this media. And that's something that feels very real to me. And it's not something you get all the time with fandom, but it is really cool to help make that. You're like, hey, I wrote that thing. And now people are becoming friends in real life because I did that. And like, that's stuff that they have done. Like, I would never take credit for the fact that they've built stuff together, and like, but also it is really neat to kind of be an auxiliary part of that.
I think to your point about Force Awakens, the High Republic is also maybe another stepping stone for people who didn't see themselves in Star Wars before, and now like the High Republic is so vast, and just the sheer number of characters and experiences that they have and what they represent. And I think that's one of my favorite things about the High Republic is it truly has something for everybody. And I mean, this book in particular has even more of those instances. I mean, we get so many incredible characters from Zyle to Drigget to, of course, Tep Tep. Like, I love all these characters with my whole heart.
Thank you.
Getting to work with Daniel, I mean, each of you are bringing in different strengths to creating this story. So I'd love to hear from you. Like, what do you feel are some of the biggest strengths that you brought to the story? And then like, how do you two bounce off of each other and your strengths to create that, shared vision for what you want the book to be?
I love Daniel. Our secret is that we actually go way back. We met when we were both writing like original science fiction fantasy stuff. So I think we might have met at like the Nebulas one year. Anyway, he's a delight. He's so funny. His story sense is great. And before I tell you about my strengths, I'm going to tell you about Daniel's, because I admire his work so much. I feel like everything Daniel writes has a lot of heart to it. He writes like found families really well. He writes family really well, and as this like warm, accepting space. There's like a lot of charm and humor in everything he writes, even when it gets dark. And Midnight Horizon was the book that pulled me into the High Republic. I was like, this is it. This is the one I love.
I still can't believe he wrote that in like 20 days or something. That's
so our secret
wild.
is we actually wrote the first draft of Escape from Valo in 21.
Don't say that to me. Don't.
Wow.
That's
Oh
fine.
my gosh.
That's fine. What have I done in 21 days?
No,
nothing.
No. Well, you didn't.
That's amazing.
You didn't almost perish because like my spouse would go to bed and then wake up and I'd still be working, and that was too wild. Or like I would walk out and they'd be like, you don't see me, and I'm just like 1,000-yard stare, looking straight through everything else. I'm like, I gotta figure out the spaceship. And they're like, okay, have some water.
You're like, I'm literally in Lonisa City Zoo right now. Like, don't talk to me. I'm petting an Acklay. Like,
yeah, apparently I have a very like angry looking, like, or sad, or like devastatingly sad looking writing brainstorming face. So they're always like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking about Acklays. Like,
that's incredible. I kind of wish like I could have that like just in my work and be like, I'm just gonna work at whatever hours and just get it out of my head when it needs to get out. But that's not like how a 9 to 5 works. So
yeah,
it's not necessarily as possible.
I would not recommend trying to write a book in like 21 days, even if like I would not recommend it. But I guess if it's gotta come out, it's gotta come out.
Right.
But yeah, I think that Daniel writes, like I said, Daniel writes warmth, and Daniel writes a lot of crying. Like happy crying, a little bit of sad crying, but mostly happy crying, a lot of like hugs, a lot of like, yeah, go team. And I think that we balance each other out because we're both very enthusiastic about each other's work. When Daniel writes family, it's like, look at this beautiful thing that holds together. When I write family, I'm like, great, perfect, catalyst for trauma, let's go. And for me, I'm always like, how do you take everybody's emotions and then dial them up to like 9,000? and how do you put as much stress on people as possible. And I realized that, writing romance is actually very close to this as well, because it is emotional stress and emotional, like trying to figure out how to deal with that. So in terms of things that I think I brought to Escape from Valo, there are moments where of like emotional devastation. I think you really see it with Drigget, especially. And like really these moments of like very intense darkness, but also like people trying to work their way through it, and usually picking the wrong option. So if you see someone doing the wrong thing, it's usually me. Uh, and I feel like I learned how to write like good family from Daniel. Like writing Xyle and their family um, is kind of what taught me how to write like warm, supportive families. Um, and trying to write like so that fun, rambunctious charm that Daniel does, like trying to sort of meet our tones in the middle, and then inevitably like building our own stuff together was really fun.
I definitely feel like we get all of that in this book. Like, some trauma, some hugs, a lot of fun. And then at the end, we're like, oh, Drigget, why? I mean, I get it, but girl.
Yeah, Drigget Y is about right. I was gonna say if like Ram is like Daniel's special like baby, like favorite son. And like we love all the characters, but I feel like if you see something like in that book where it's really really beautiful and it's about Ram, I can't possibly take credit for that. Like it's funny, we were reading the book like after it was done, and we're like, I don't remember who wrote what pieces. Like, we actually, there's some parts because we were just in it the entire time. Like, there are a lot of parts where we're like, we don't know who actually wrote this bit. But I do know that, like, if it was very, very, very emotionally intense, Daniel definitely had his hands in that, like, with Ram, Daniel's hands were in that, like, elbow deep. And similarly, if there were just agonizingly stressful scenes with Drigget, that's my fault.
I think one thing that I really, really love about the middle grade novels is like every time I read one, I feel like I heal a bit of my own inner child, because these characters are dealing, with such uh, big, important, difficult emotions, and they make their way through it as young people. And in the past, we've seen kind of like the main emotions for these characters. I think we did a lot about grief and anxiety kind of in phase one, but one of the emotions that I really felt in this book, from Gavi specifically, was this kind of shame that he feels. There's like the grief of before the Republic Fair and after the Republic Fair, and then there's this shame of like, I can't use the Force in the same way anymore. And also, I have this crush. And also, I feel like everything is my fault. And I was like, oh, LOL. Ouch. But we have this, this beautiful moment towards the end of the book where, Gabby talks about his crush. I was like, oh, oops. And immediately kind of that weight like lifts off of him in that moment. And I think that is like really beautiful. So like when crafting these characters and like, Gavi specifically, what kind of story, did you want for these characters, these young people? And how did you end up kind of both of you guys like talking about shame and grief with this character in particular?
I love Gavi. So I guess our like original concept for Escape from Valo was kind of like, what if we basically did the Goonies, but with the worst Jedi kids in their class? Like, who all have like issues one way or another. Like Kildo is like, he's brilliant, but his ADHD is really, really intense. Tep Tep is like, she was super shy. And I think when we realized that actually Gavi was like possibly the shining star, like the A+ gifted student in his class, but something has happened to him and now he can't use the Force. That's interesting. Um, and as we were talking about it and like sort of turning this concept over and over, um, I think it became really clear that, yeah, it's a fun, goofy story, but it's also a story about living through enemy occupation. um, it's a war story. And so, you know, these three kids have just watched everybody in their lives, like all of their like mentors and their like classmates and their guardians all die. And they've been sort of living in the wilderness alone, just the three of them, for a year. And the thing that brings them back to Lanisa City is, and gives them hope again, are Ram's broadcast as the Scarlet Skull, being like, resistance is alive, and not everything is lost. So they do come back, but that kind of experience leaves like huge scars on people. So thinking about what cut Gavi off from the Force, we realized it was fear. That he couldn't push past his fear to connect anymore. Both connect with the Force, but also connect to like Kildo, and he's still doing his best, but it's paralyzing. So yeah, I think shame is exactly it. Yes, it's guilt. And it's fear. And he's sort of dealing with feeling like he's responsible for his friends. If he's like the A+ student, then he's like, it's my responsibility to like, I love my friends. It's my responsibility to keep everything together. And there's this parallel too with him and Drigget, because they're both doing their best to hold everything and everyone else together, and it is destroying them. So that was something that sort of came out as we iterated, but also as we wrote the first draft. And we were like, oh, there it is. That's the missing piece. That's what we were talking about.
You bring up like the point about just how much these kids have had to go through at such a young age, and like the fear that weighs down on them because of it. I think is just it resonates with me, because I think as a world, as society, the last couple years have been pretty rough. We have faced a lot of societal difficulties. We're continuing to do so. And it's so interesting, whether this has been intentional or not, just the way that the High Republic has sort of mirrored our experiences in the real world, and just going through a traumatic period of time. And I think there's like a lot we can learn from these characters and the way that they overcome fear. And I wish we need a fear jar on the show, because the amount we talk about fear, it's like we got to put $1 in every time, because it's such a fundamental question of the High Republic. Like, what do you think it is about just like the importance of overcoming fear and like relating it to our own world, just like what we can maybe take away from some of these stories to maybe push through our own fear in real life of the things that we face every single day?
I think that fear, unfortunately, is sort of like a universal emotion and experience. And it's expressed in a lot of different ways, in many different contexts. But I think that it is something that's very relatable. And I think that, you know, for a galaxy at war, it challenges your ideas of, you know, what the world is supposed to be. You know, if the world, it's like, this world is not supposed to be like this should never have happened. And now we have to deal with it, whether or not we're ready for it or not. And I think that that's such a, you know, what people choose to do, because they believe it's the right thing, and the consequences of those things. I think that's really relatable. And I think it makes sense in the context of, I mean, it doesn't matter. You could be a child, like the Escape from Valo kids trying to deal with this. You can be an adult, you be the hero of Hetzel and be like, what have I done? So I think it's really powerful to get to see people like navigate their fear, and what it does to them and to the people around them. So I think that's such a big part of the High Republic.
And it's so important too to see kids at a young age and how they overcome those emotions. Like you're saying, it's just as important to see how Tep Tep or Gavi or whoever overcomes fear just the same as it is to see how Elzar Mann or Avar Kriss overcome their fear, right? And I always think of Yoda in the Attack of the Clones when he says, "Truly wonderful the mind of a child is." And I feel that every time I read these books because I'm like, this is a perspective you will not get anywhere else except for maybe the middle grade books or maybe possibly the young adults. Um, but they're just as invaluable. They're just as valuable and sometimes teach you even more about yourself or like the world around you. So I really felt that with these characters. And um, Sarah, I know there's a Ram Jam Ram you quote so often that you love, and it's pretty applicable
part
here.
for the part, whole for the whole, and each part for the role it plays, not for what you want it to be, not for what it like it could be, but for what it is. Anyway, Race to Crush My Tower.
I love that.
The way that book and that quote, like in particular, I think I mess up the end of that quote every time, but that quote in particular, like really, I like brought that into my day to day as a guiding light, because I think I really needed that when I read that book. And so as much as these books are for age 12-year-olds, and I so much like want to put these books in the hands of every age 12-year-old I see, and I'm like, hi, I have a Star Wars book for you, my young friend, like let's go. And that's what I did when I was a bookseller all the time. I was like, hey, friend, do you like Star Wars? Because I got some of these for you. But even as an adult, these books leave a really big impression on me, and the wisdom from the master, as much as these books are about the kids and the kids going through lessons, always stick out to me. So like in this book, we got a wise lesson from, I'm going to pronounce this master's name wrong, I think, but Master Abel.
Yeah, Abel's great.
Abel, Aebal, something. We'll get an
Abel.
audiobook and they'll take us and they'll tell us as well at some point. But he says, instead of hiding from our feelings, we need to embrace them and let go. And as much as that is kind of obvious in a sense, there is a certain I got to put a Post-it note on that, because it's coming from the authority figure in their lives, or someone they loved and cherished. And I just wanted to know a little bit about like the importance of if you and Daniel kind of put together, like, let's make sure we have a lesson from an adult in this as much as we're learning from the kids and the kids learning from each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So yes, but also it's complicated, because this is something that Daniel and I talked about every day, like all the time, which is to say the question of attachment or non-attachment and what it means. And I will be real with you, I did not like Jedi until I read Cantum Psy in Midnight Horizon. I was like, that's my parent. Like that's the one I want. And I think, because growing up with the prequel trilogy, that's a Jedi Order at its worst. And they're like, no feelings, all guilt, no attachment, and attachment's bad, love is bad. And I was like, we've seen the result of this, and it's Vader. It's not good. But that's what people mostly think of when they think about the Jedi. And so going into this, we talked a lot about attachment, and Daniel and I are very aligned on this. But to live without attachment is to be able to accept everything, like to be able to be like, here's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling this way. Maybe this is why I'm feeling this way. And instead of being like, and I can't feel it, to be able to go, okay, I'm going to let it live in me. And then when it's time for it to leave, then it will leave. Instead of shutting down and trying to wall off your feelings, which leads to fear, which leads to anger, which leads to the dark side. So that was a core part of this book. And having, like you said, having an authority figure talk about it is really important. There's a fun thing that we did, and that's like the big issue with Gavi. He's like, I don't know how to cope with this. I'm afraid of feeling everything, because he feels so much. And then at a certain point in the book, I'm like, can I talk about spoilers? Is that cool?
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Free
Okay.
reign.
Right. So when Gabby's about to die, he's thinking about this, and at this point, the question of like, is it bad to have attachments? Is because it means you can feel loss, has come up a few times, and he's dying, and he has that moment where he says something, where he thinks something like, "This is why I just have to let it all go. I'll just let go." And then he thinks, "No, I'm not going to let it go. I'm not going to let go because this is important." And that's when he feels everything, and like the wall breaks, and he can feel the force again. Because in a lot of sense, that denial was keeping him out. And then, sort of in a weird reverse way, Drigget has sort of been like feeling everything, and she uses the Jedi techniques at the very end, and actually throughout the book, that Gavi taught her to seal off her own emotions. So at the very end, she's like, I've pared myself down, and I'm taking all my attachments and I'm letting them go so that I can do whatever I have to survive and to destroy the people I hate. And that's some dark side shit, you know? So getting that weird reversal is fun.
Yeah, and they're such interesting characters together. Obviously as friends, and we get moments throughout this book where we see them have compassion for one another despite everything that's happened, despite all the time that's passed, and despite the fact that they're in different places. And I thought that was like beautiful and heartbreaking, and all of the emotions, because I, as a reader, I'm just like, I want everything to be the way that it was for them. They deserve better than this right now. But of course, it's not necessarily that easy. But I loved the compassion throughout the book, because in those moments where, Gavi is going to visit, Drigget's mother again, and putting on her clothes and going to like, attempt to be her, and kind of having that moment of like, we're in different places right now, but I still care about you, but we're going in different directions. There's not a question at the end of this. I just there's a thought that I needed to express.
Thank you. No, that makes me happy. That was one of my favorite scenes to write. I have to confess, I did cry a lot while writing it.
I got it.
It's that moment where you look at your past and you're like, I've changed. Like, I can't go back. I've changed, and I don't know if I like that I've changed, but it is what it is, and this is who I am. And that longing for like what used to be. I like that they're fake twins. I think it's fun. And I also think it highlights how different they are. I think that that scene with Drigget's family it tells you a lot, not just about like Drigget, but also a lot about like who Gavi was to these people, his connection to the city. And that was a big thing as we were going through it. Is like, if we are trying to save Valo and we're trying to save Lanisa City has to be here. Like, it can't just be about like a bunch of Jedi kids having an adventure and they're like, we beat the Nile, yay, the city's saved. It's like, no, if the heart of this is Lanisa City, so we have to actually get into it and see it. And that's actually a big part of why Drigget was in the book. And so having her as the connection to Lanisa City, for Gavi, and then having him as her connection to the Jedi, even though they're not in those same places, was, I think, one of the things that sort of tied a lot of the things in this book together.
Totally. Yeah, that moment where Mrs. Parse is like, my Jedi son, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go cry about this now.
I love that you mentioned like Valo and Lanisa City being such a central character to this book, and in that passage in particular, when Gavi is close to death, thinking about that Lanisa City was his, Valo was his, because Valo was the Force, and especially the animals on Valo and in Lanisa City are just as important to that cause. So amazing. I have to say, like, bringing back the sacred trio, and I'm not talking about Lucan and Leia. I'm talking about the Reek, the Acklay, and the Nexu. That's my sacred trio as a prequel kid. Blue Blossom specifically, I loved that. When I opened the illustration, I was like, oh my god, there's a Reek. This is amazing. And then there's little baby Acklay. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
What was some of the thought behind having the zoo in particular be like their base of operations, and in the aftermath of that Nile attack, and some of the history and background with Tep Tep helping to nurture some of those creatures?
Yeah, so I don't remember whose idea it was to make the zoo their home base, but whoever came up with that, that was a great idea, because I'm sure it wasn't me. There's no way it was me. Every time there's a good idea, I'm like, it's got to have been Daniel or like Mike Siglain or someone. But the great thing about that is like we get to see the zoo in ruins. It's so tied into other storytelling that we've seen. And so you have the connection, and it's cool that you get to see it earlier the way it was, and now you get to see it as it is now. And it is sort of the symbol of like what has happened to the city. I think Tep Tep basically loving animals so much was so central to her character. And I've always loved Acklays. So the idea that she loves animals and she has a special connection to them, but also the bigger and like more carnivorous and dangerous they are, the better the connection. She just loves big, scary animals. That was something that I really loved from the get-go about Tep Tep. So when we were writing that scene in the zoo where Ram's like, oh my god, there's so many scary animals. And Tep Tep's like, yeah, meet my friends. I think that was one of the keystone moments when we were working on draft 1, and I was like, that's who you are, Tep Tep. We got you.
As somebody, just I love them so much. Like, imagine the delight on my face as a reader when Tep Tep is naming all of these Acklay with like the cutest little names you've ever heard in your life, and I'm like, this is the greatest Star Wars thing that's ever happened to me.
Sarah loves when we podcast and we ever bring up the Acklay. She does the Acklay arms from Attack of the Clones. You know, when it's just like the camera's on the ground and you see it punching and the sand's coming up. Oh my gosh,
I'm
that
really
is such a
normal
cool
about
creature.
Like, I'm so normal about it.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite. So good.
It's the best. It's the best. I literally have a tote bag that has the Geonosian Battle Arena creatures on it. It delights me to no end. Okay, I'll stop talking about them now. There are other things that are also delightful in this book I could talk about all day. And speaking of like another delightful character that does make a return, this is a little bit pivoting, but other things that delighted me in this book, V18 comes back. We meet V18 in, of course, Craster Crashpoint Tower with Ram, and he flies, of course, because he does. What a legend. So, did you guys know that you wanted to bring him back from the beginning? And what was it like kind of being like, this is the moment that we'll see V18 return? And also, where's my Droid Starlight Beacon Survivor group book? Because I want to know all of their adventures as well.
I want to know their adventures too.
That we should. I'm going to write to Mike Siglain and be like, hey, I think I've got a new one for you.
Do so. Yeah, I think the idea of like, we're building something new and we're like, okay, who's brand new? Who's coming back? And so V18, much beloved, and also much beloved to Daniel and also to me, but Daniel's baby, has such a strong connection to Ram and is, and they're separated because of the Stormwall. So Ram's out here sending his messages out, trying to reach his friends because he's stranded. And he does it every day, even though like he's had no response. And so V18 coming back was like, it was injecting hope, but also it is that sort of thing where it's like not only not all hope is lost, but the people who you love and who love you have not forgotten you. So it was really, and it was also really fun to write V18. Like, A Level with You was really fun. But ultimately, I think it is that connection to Ram that makes it special. And that he's like, we're not alone. There is hope.
And that's even shown too with Zyle. Like, all the Avengers are coming in at the end of this book. You got V18, and you got the pirates coming back into the picture too. I loved Zyle in this book. We haven't talked enough about them, but it was just so cool just seeing, like you said, we're not alone. Not all hope is lost. Like, there are people who really do want to help with this cause, and I think Zyle coming around and being in it for more than the BACTA and more than the money towards the end, and everybody loving this character, I think it was amazing.
Zyle is the least traumatized character in this book, which is hilarious and great.
They're so
just
chill.
vibing. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's like, I'm having the worst time of my life. And Zyle's like, I'm having the time of my life. This is fun. I love Saya. Saya is like my favorite phase 2 baby. So getting to see the Dankrax again, united, has been very fun. And I think one of Daniel's big asks for this book was like, we got to have a pirate kid. Want to have a pirate kid who's connected to the Dankrax. And I was like, yes. So having this kid who's grown up with all of these legends of like their most amazing grandma ever. She did this, she did that. She was the best pirate in the world, in the galaxy. And of course, I mean, she probably did all that stuff. But also, you know, when you're dead and you're a legend, you're infallible. So having a kid who has grown up with these legends and idolizes their grandma who's no longer with them and is like, I want to be just like her, was fun because it was almost like revisiting Saya if Saya had been, you know, a little different and a little younger and less stressed out. But also, you know, it was really cool to get to see characters who Saya had like interacted with and like been part of their crew, get to see them interact with Saya's grandkid, who is so different, but also bears a really strong resemblance to Saya. So that was really, I mean, that was something that I thought was really neat going in. And like I said, I love Dankrax, so writing a connection with Dankrax is so great.
I feel like you gotta just have everything in there, and like if we're gonna do all of these plot points and they're gonna do all of this, why not also add the Dankrax? You know, like we're already here.
Just love them. I love them.
They're so cool and so fun.
Zyle does a great job, I think, of bringing out the inner child of all the kids who have been through so much as well. Just on the thought of them vibing constantly and always having a great time, like that sort of energy really helps to balance out the grief and the shame and the trauma that all of our characters are feeling. So I thought that was a nice touch too. You know, you need some of that uplifting feeling in a book of this weight, and what they've had to go through. And so it's just a nice contrast there to some of the other kids who have just really been through the ringer.
Yeah. One of my favorite scenes to write and now to read was a scene where Zyle and Gavi are fist fighting in the zoo next to the shuttle. And they're punching each other and they're like, shut up, you're great. No, you're great. Everyone loves you. What are you talking about? Everyone loves you more. It's like they're just being stupid and wholesome. And I don't know. And the fight is about so much more than them punching each other in the face. It's, you know, it's the I appreciate you, why can't you appreciate yourself conversation. But if both people are dumbasses. So it's very, yeah. Zyle,
I feel like that's how it always goes though. Like, you know, you're like feeling a little insecure, your bestie's feeling a little insecure, you're like everybody's a little bit of a
me and
dumbass.
Sarah hopping on a Zoom to podcast after a long day of work, and we're like, no, you're great, and we're just, you know, whatever.
Like, what do you
over the Zoom
mean?
screen.
We need you on this podcast.
You need that old reliable bestie in your life, and Zyle is that. Zyle is the greatest now.
Thank you. I am curious, who are your favorites?
Ooh,
dangerous question.
And so
there's
in
no-
this book specifically, right?
In this book, no wrong answers.
Mm.
I really connected with Gavi's story throughout the book. So I feel like I've talked a lot about Gavi. Gavi, he's the guy for me. I love him. My guy.
I want to say Tep Tep because I'm a huge proponent of all life is sacred, all creatures are sacred in the Star Wars galaxy, and Tep Tep is one of those characters that's just like, hey, this really scary being. I love it. It's my baby. Let's bring the baby in. And I love that energy. I love that so much. And I think more Jedi need to embrace that mentality. That, you know, just because it's, you know, giant and scary doesn't mean it should be killed, or doesn't mean it should be, you know, vanquished. So I love that.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Fun fact, the CV worm, the giant worm that busts into the ship, like the last bit of the book, that is a scaled up by a lot Star Wars version of a bobbit worm. Which it's a predator that lives at the bottom of the ocean. It can be a couple centimeters long. It can be like 10 feet long. It really depends how old this thing is, and it's like an ambush predator. So if a fish swims along the surface of the sand, this thing will just bust out of the sand with its huge jaws and clamp down and drag it back into the sand. It is one of my favorite. I love these things. They're one of my favorite creatures. But they also have that rainbow sheen that you see in the book. So that's like a real thing. So if you ever want to see what a CV worm would look like in real life, it's a bobbit worm. They're like unkillable too.
I'm terrified. I'm delighted to know this. I'm slightly concerned about this worm, but like, yes. Oh my gosh. I will be doing the Googles.
It's giving Dune.
Because I'm too curious. Oh, yeah. I literally saw Dune last night. Like the sandworms are on my mind.
I need to see Tep Tep in the future, and a young adult just be like, you know, throw the little things out and just ride the worm into battle. I need it.
So good. I would ride one of those worms. Like,
heck yeah.
So
I was
cool.
like, we're like, you know, an hour into this movie. I'm sorry. I will get back on the train in like 0.2 seconds. And then we're getting like sandworm riding POV, like from the camera. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're riding the worm right now.
I want to ride the worm.
It's real. It's so real. But kind of speaking of like life and these creatures being really scary, but also like that is my baby, the sweetest baby pie, the Nameless. The Nameless. We love to talk about the Nameless on our podcast. We have a whole very intense, incredibly silly, serious like segment called Egg Talk, where we talk all about the Nameless and our theories about them. But basically, we think they're terrifying, but also that we must protect them at all costs, and they've never done anything wrong in their entire lives. And in this book, we get Grendak. Am I saying their name? This little baby pie, right?
Yeah, Grendrak. I'm trying to remember too.
Yeah. How do we go about every time we read a High Republic book? How do you and all the High Republic authors continue to make them more scary and terrifying, but also more like, oh no, I must protect?
Oh, I love them. I love them so much. It's funny. We knew that we wanted to have a scientist character who was like sort of Bulan's like Igor type character. And we weren't sure who they were yet, like as a person. And I think we hit a point where we were like, wait, this person's not an adult. He's got to be a teenager. So he's like, I think a couple of years older than like the kids, and he's the real threat in the book. And we knew
Vark not so much.
no, not Vark's a bit of a Scooby-Doo villain. But we knew that he had been experimenting on Nameless, and we knew that he was going to bring one. I don't remember if whose idea was to have it be a tiny Nameless. But I love it. And I realized that have you ever seen the photos of like Paris Hilton carrying her tiny dog? That's the energy. have
I love it.
you have this guy who's like, I don't care about anything. I care about my work. I don't even really register people, except occasionally he does. He's like, you're a real person. But most of the time he's like, I could not possibly be bothered. But the one thing he cares about is this rotting chihuahua that is a nightmare. And I love the rotting chihuahua. I love Niv Drendow. And it's funny because it is scary because of what the Nameless can do, and also it's scary because it's actively decomposing. So it's like a living, rotting body, and he loves it. It's like when you're a parent and your kid is an absolute shithead, and you're like, I'm not going to discipline my kid. It's fine. Look how cute he is. That's basically Drendow and Grendek.
Yes.
That's a perfect analogy. I love that.
Exactly the vibe. And everybody knows that Grendrak is a shithead. Like everybody knows, and they're like, I can't believe I have to deal with this kid today.
Yeah. All the other children of the storm are bringing their Nameless to the playground, and they're just like, keep them away from that thing. Bad influence.
Bad influence on my kid.
That awful kid decked out in Louis Vuitton because like their parent couldn't possibly have their perfect little angel wear anything less than the best. That's Niv Drendow and his baby Nameless. Rip to a real one.
Honestly.
Well, as we start to close out here, we have really two really quick rapid fire questions. One of which has become one of our favorite rapid fire questions now for every author, and it is about characters specific to your book and the Star Wars saga at large. If you could take a character from Escape from Valo and have them have a conversation with anybody in Star Wars, who would you choose and what would they talk about?
Oh geez, this is so hard. This is so difficult.
But there's no wrong answers, is the good part.
Oh, that's so true. Does it have to be a different era?
Nope,
Well,
can
not
be anything.
necessarily.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is your own fan fiction in your mind. Can be whatever you want.
Ooh, my fanfic is I want to see Drigget have a conversation with Mark Yanro. That's what I want to see.
Oh,
yeah.
I love that.
It's gnarly, right?
Yeah. Especially with the way this book ends too. She wants to learn a lot, so.
Yeah, she does. She wants to know everything. And I love Markion. He's so scary. He's my favorite. I love him. Or Lorna D. That could be fun too.
Ooh. I feel like I'm gonna go consider the possibilities. I say this every time, like no answers are bad answers, and I'm like, I'm gonna go think on that because I'm like, all these characters, yes.
I would love to see these kids talk to the kids from Canto Bight in The Last Jedi. That would be something. That would be something.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
I love when Star Wars is just kids talking to each other and being kids. That's why I love this book. And I'm excited for Skeleton Crew because it's also just a bunch of kids in like Star Wars Goonies, so I can't wait for that.
It's gonna be so fun. I can't wait for it either.
Oh, when's it happening? Okay, I need it now. Now I'm just thinking about kids from Star Wars chatting with each other.
I've got a question to ask you guys, if you want. Who from Escape from Valo, and this is a little self-indulgent, but I'm curious, who from Escape from Valo would you want to talk to? Who from Dr. Aphra?
Ooh.
That's a hard one, right?
So like which character from Dr. Aphra I want talking to a character from Escape from Valo?
Yes.
I feel like this is a basic choice, but I would love to see Zyle talk to Aphra.
That'd be fun.
Because I feel like Zyle being this pirate character and Aphra being like going on all these just archaeological adventures and trying to find certain artifacts. Like I feel like those two interests would just align. I would love that. I think that'd be interesting.
That'd be fun.
I don't know if I have a better answer than that. I like that answer.
That can be the Friends of the Force certified put a stamp on it answer. That's our collective answer. We need to see it. We need to see it. Which, by the way, congratulations on Afra coming to an end.
Thank you.
Very great run. 40 issues. Amazing. Can't wait to see whatever's next. Hopefully, if you're doing more Star Wars comics in the future, would love to see it. But
Ooh.
yeah. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Okay, great.
Well, this is not a gotcha question. That's just me. That's just me
No,
putting it
no
out into the
gotchas,
universe. Yes.
This is also a big question, but a good one and a happy one, and not like a trivia sort of one. At the end of every episode, we love to ask, what does Star Wars mean to you?
That's a big question.
I know, I'm sorry.
It's so good. It's so good. What does Star Wars mean to me? Star Wars is home, I think. Like, it is adventure. It's dangerous. It is scary. There are real threats. But also, it's a place where everyone can live. Like, it might not be a great life, but, you know, of course there are Jedi. Of course there's Sith. There are villains, there are heroes, but also they're just random people living their lives. I think the Star Wars universe is so big that the idea of like limiting it is silly. So for me, I think, especially with my own journey with Star Wars, I feel like it's a place I've grown to love, and it's a place where I feel like anything is possible. And I feel like increasingly as we move forward, looking at where Star Wars was like decades, like 3 decades ago till now even, we've seen so much growth. We have seen so much expansion. We have seen so much more representation. We have seen characters who look like us and feel like us, go on to be like really complex, interesting people. So yeah, Star Wars is a place where everyone can be and have adventures and be the hero, be the villain, and just be. And I think and I hope that it'll continue to be so, and that more people who grow up with the Star Wars that we are making now will get to make Star Wars in the future, and they'll be able to carry their own vision forward. So that's what Star Wars means to me.
Well, that is a perfect answer. And I would just like to say thank you for lending your voice to this saga and lending your voice to these stories and helping to create that future that we're all going to, you know, get to be a part of in the future, you know, with these stories and these characters and new characters that we can't even think of yet. So thanks for taking the time to chat with us today. It has been an absolute delight to get to talk to you about this book and just about talk to you about Star Wars in general. And congratulations on Escape from Valo. And
Thank you.
I don't typically end the podcast, so I don't have a better ending than that.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk with you guys, and I'm glad that you had fun reading Escape from Valo, because that's like the big goal, is building something that makes people happy, and that people can enjoy. And like I said, this book is my heart. So I'm really, really glad that you had a great time with it.
That weird feeling when you don't want to escape from Valo because you're having too much fun. And if you escape from Valo, it means the book is ending. Please don't. Please don't escape. But yeah, seriously, thank you so much for joining us. It was such a pleasure to have you become a first timer on the podcast. Where can our folks find you online, and anything that you have coming up that you would like to give a shout out to and promote outside of Star Wars, inside of Star Wars, you name it, whatever you can talk about.
So you can find me on Twitter at CrashWong, one word. I have a website, which is crashwong.net. And if you're looking for something to read, if you have not read Dr. Aphra, read Dr. Aphra. If you have not read Escape from Valo, read Escape from Valo. And if you want to give, like, I write short fiction too. If you want to give my short fiction a spin, I have a short story called Hungry Daughters of Starving Mothers. That is online for free at Nightmare Magazine, and it is also the story that won the Nebula and World Fantasy Award in the year it came out. So if you want to read a story that is definitely on the darker side, more dark than Escape from Valo, about a Chinese American young woman looking for love and good food in New York City, I guess. Check out that story.
I just found it online, so I will include that in the description of this episode. So go check it out. I'm actually going to read that right after this because I have no plans tonight, so I can't wait.
Please tell me what you think.
Will do.
I can't tell you I will not tell you a single thing about the story. You just have to go in blind.
Yes. Oh, I'm ready. Blind read. Here we come. But Alyssa, thank you so much again. Truly a pleasure, and hopefully not the last time you will join us. So until next time, may the force be with you.
Thank you for listening to our conversation with Alyssa Wong. And if you enjoyed Escape from Valo as well, you can stay tuned to our upcoming book discussion all about the story and the characters. So be on the lookout for that. And you can also follow us on all of our socials where we will post that episode and all future updates on this podcast. And be sure to leave us a rating if you'd be so kind. Help us out with other folks finding the show.
Yes, we also have a Patreon where tiers start at just $1. They help keep the lights on here at Friends of the Force, and so we're very grateful for our patrons: AJ, Ben, Brian, Cheryl, Clay, David, Deborah, Emma, Jennifer, Katie, Knights of Ren, Leanne, Logan, Lucy, Lindsay, Matthew, Nicole, Rob, Ruth, Saber Bouquet, Santa, Sky Talkers, Stephen, Tom, Topher, and Travis. Thank you all very much for your support, and thank you for everybody who takes the time out of their day to listen to our conversation with Alyssa Wong. We're very grateful. We hope that you enjoyed it. Do you have a pairing of what Afro character and what Escape from Valo character you would want to chat with each other? If it's different than the one that we said, please let us know.
That was a great question.
I want to ponder all the possibilities.
Yes, and there are a lot of diehard Afro fans out there, so I feel like there are going to be a variety of answers that I can't wait to hear about. So
yes.
Thank you all for listening once again, and until next time, may the force be with you always.